And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Joining us now is our friend Glenn Kirschner, former 30-year federal prosecutor, served in the U.S. Army in JAG Corps, never once invaded Greenland in all his time in the military. Check out his Substack, glennkirschner.substack.com, and of course, his YouTube show, Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner, more than 1 million followers. Glenn, nice to see you, my friend. Thanks for making time in between everything else.
Always great to be with you, Dean.
So, look, there's a lot to cover. I don't know if you want to weigh in on Greenland at all. I mean, you served in the military. You don't talk about politics. I don't know if there's a legal angle to it that, or just disturbing you as an American that we're being a bully in ways that I've never seen the U.S. I've seen Putin do it. I've never seen a U.S. president do it like this.
Yeah, we're bullying our allies. And, when you look at interviews with Trump a couple of years ago, he said, look, I'm a real estate guy and I just want to acquire it. It's land that I think I ought to have. And then more recently, as I know you saw, he said, first of all, I'm unconstrained by anything except my own mind and my own morality. And then he said, for my psychology, I need Greenland. And at least the reporter asked the follow-up question, is that in the interest of the United States and the United States people? He basically said, I don't care. For my psychology, I need it. I'm paraphrasing here. But listen, the man is becoming more demented by the day. He's a malignant narcissist. He's a sadist. And at some point, somebody's got to stop him peacefully and using the political tools available to us. But we can't have this. We just flat out can't have this.
Because he's obsessed with Greenland and Iceland. He wants both, apparently, because they're the same country. His brain doesn't work well. Yesterday, by the way, was the first time I saw numerous actual, it wasn't like people like us, but people on cable news that were more, let's say, restrained in their commentary, bringing up the cognitive decline of Donald Trump. Like, it's undeniable now. Now, is he at the point of incompetent legally on the 25th Amendment? Probably parts of the day he's lucid and parts of the day he's not. It's a question of when it eclipses the incompetence, eclipses, and are they going to keep hiding him? And that's not good for the country. You have to know who's running the nation. And Stephen Miller is awful. I mean, Trump is terrible, but I don't want Miller running the country.
And if he really has troops that are potentially preparing to deploy the 11th Airborne Division up in Alaska, where I served on active duty back in the 80s, I know that Air Force Base, Elmendorf, and the Army Post Richardson very well. If he's really, I don't know if he's going to send troops into Minnesota. I don't know if he's intending to send them to Greenland. But every day he's abusing and putting in harm's way our military members. So somebody has to step up and be a damn adult and say enough, impeach and remove. It doesn't take that many Republicans to cross over and accomplish that.
No, I mean, and you serve in the military. There's probably no one who signed up for our military now who did it so the prospect of attacking Minnesota. I mean, because I just saw right before we came on, they are putting more troops on alert. They already put some. Now they're putting more on from Fort Bragg. Well, I think it's Fort Bragg. They put more on alert. The National Guard is there for issues if there was a lack of control. There's not. It's peaceful. We don't see any reports. He is just dying to be this kind of dictator where he's oppressing people internally and trying to get power externally by acquiring land, which is all dictators, fascist leaders do this.
And the only one creating unrest and chaos in a dangerous situation in Minneapolis are Donald Trump's ICE officers, ICE agents, and Customs and Border Patrol. These are the people that are creating the very chaos that Donald Trump will then use as a pretext to say, listen, I've got to invoke the Insurrection Act. There's so much chaos in Minneapolis. It was Judge April Perry who said Donald Trump is pouring fuel on a fire he started. I mean, let's wake the F up here.
I agree with you. And pivoting right to that, or continuing on with ICE, I mean, we saw a video, I'm sure you saw it, of the man, 56 years old. He's a U.S. citizen. They took him out of his house. They broke his door down, ICE. There's video of it. Break the door down. They grab him. He's in his underwear in sub-freezing temperature. They bring him out. They don't even ask him for ID. He's a U.S. citizen. They didn't even care. Finally, the family lets him go there, and they return him later that day without apology, without explanation. This is like roving bands of militias going around like you would read about in Iraq during the war or something.
Yeah, Dean, this is literally false imprisonment of a U.S. citizen. This is an assault. This is a violation of that gentleman's Fourth Amendment right against an unreasonable seizure, fancy word for putting hands on somebody and not letting them leave. And the reporting was that this gentleman's daughter said, I in the house, I've got his ID here. They wouldn't even take it. You know, and the good news is we start to see police chiefs in that part of Minnesota step up and say, they're also doing this to our police officers. But Dean, this is what I would tell them, and I would tell the state National Guard commanders. You need to protect the residents of your state from the assault and the unconstitutional conduct of Donald Trump's, masked, armed marauders. You don't just, if a police officer, as that police chief just related, if a police officer off duty, doesn't even say up front, I'm a police officer, because she was just trying to talk her way through what was being done to her, holds up her cell phone to record what's going on, and they snatch it out of her hands, Dean, that's a criminal assault in violation of the laws of the state of Minnesota. You don't let that go unaddressed, because if you do, then you're encouraging even more extreme violence, crimes, and deprivation of constitutional rights. Start arresting federal officers who are committing state crimes, period.
I could not agree with you more, Glenn. I mean, I had AG Keith Ellison on. He comes on every month, and we talked. And, they're investigating with the murder of Renee Good and see what they can charge. I think there is a concern. They don't want to overreach. But I'm telling you, I wish it wasn't in one state. I wish Democratic AGs in various states charge a whole swath of these officers. That sends a message. And some might be acquitted, some might not be, but they're going to have to go through the system and be processed. And their peers in ICE are going to see that and go like, I don't want that to happen to me. Because right now, Glenn, what's the message? You are literally above the law. Because Stephen Miller's saying that. Trump is saying, J.D. Vance says you have absolute immunity. Absolute lie. That's an absolute lie. But they keep hearing, they believe it. This will become more and more dangerous till they kill more Americans. And I don't even know then if they'll be charged. I mean, you've got to charge. We need to see AGs charge people and prosecutors charge them. Let them use their immunity in court. Let them argue it there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the failure of state law enforcement authorities to act for reasons that I understand. I mean, you don't want to take the feds on in a fight, in court or otherwise. But it's not a question of what you want to do. It's a question of what your sworn responsibility is to protect the residents of your state. And I've heard both AG Ellison and I've heard the Hennepin County State Attorney say, we're going to investigate the officer-involved fatal shooting of Renee Good. Dave Ehrenberg and I just jointly authored a piece about what that will look like from the perspective of, Dave being a state prosecutor and me being a federal prosecutor. But what you have to do, Dean, is get all of the evidence of the Renee Good shooting before the grand jury in Minnesota. They will indict because there's probable cause that this was excessive force resulting in death. Then it will move into the courts. Then you use all of the tools available. You use state court search warrants and orders. But if that doesn't have the desired effect of wrestling the evidence out of the hands of the feds, it's going to get removed to federal court because he'll claim I was a federal officer acting under color of law. And the law provides that he can then have the case, quote, removed, transferred to federal court. Now you've got a federal court judge. And Dean, there's not a federal court judge worth his or her salt who, when asked by state prosecutors in a motion that would be joined by Jonathan Ross and his lawyers, because they may believe there's some exculpatory evidence being held by the federal government. When they asked the federal judge, order the damn Department of Justice to provide evidence that will not compromise a federal investigation because there is none, order them to turn it over, it's on. That's what you do. And you know what? You do it win, lose, or draw, because you have to hold these people accountable, or you got to, go down swinging, trying to hold them accountable.
We saw the news about the DOJ sending a subpoena to Minnesota AG Ellison's office, not for him, but for certain documents. And also the DOJ subpoenas to Governor Walz and the mayor and others. And I wonder if part of that is saying, if you indict our ICE agent, this is what we're doing. Like they're trying to intimidate them. And I wonder if that's playing a role there. Do you think that could be part of it?
Absolutely, because these are bogus subpoenas. First of all, you have to have evidence that a crime was committed, adequate predication before you start issuing grand jury subpoenas. And the reporting is the subpoenas that they issued don't even cite a federal statute that they claim was violated that they are investigating. We always put the statute on the subpoena before we issued it, so it was clear what we were looking into. So listen, this is the way I see these subpoenas. Obviously, it's an intimidation tactic, and maybe they're hoping that Governor Walz, for example, will plead the fifth. Not because he's done anything wrong, but he knows they're weaponizing the system against him, so he could say, look, I'm not. And then what will they do? They'll use that to their advantage. Of course, Donald Trump has pled the fifth before, too. But they'll say, you see, he's guilty of something. He pleaded the fifth. No, he pleaded the fifth to protect himself against the bogus subpoena. But here's what you do, Dean. You fight the dang thing at every turn. You file a motion to quash the subpoena. You go in and litigate their evidentiary predicate for saying there is a reason to bring a criminal probe in the first place, because there is none. They're not obstructing any investigation under the federal law of obstructing or impeding. So you've got to go hard. You've got to go hard after this.
Glenn, I saw a report that Pete Hegseth has sent JAG lawyers to Minneapolis. You had been a JAG lawyer to help with the prosecution there. Why would JAG, is that typical? Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe there are times he sent 40 JAG lawyers to Minneapolis U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, the Posse Comitatus Act says the military can't involve itself in civilian law enforcement. So for openers, this runs afoul very likely of the Posse Comitatus Act. Here's the exception. There have been times when JAG officers have been detailed to various civilian prosecutorial duties. I had JAG officers come over to the DC U.S. Attorney's Office and be there on detail to supplement our day-to-day work, particularly when our caseloads were high. This had nothing to do with politics, and there were legal opinions issued by both, I think, DOD and DOJ saying, this is okay. This isn't really what the Posse Comitatus Act prohibits. So there is at least some minimal support for it, but not in the way they're trying to do it. But I would say be careful what you ask for, because they also took some JAG lawyers and detailed them as immigration law judges. And what did they do? They started granting asylum applications at a far higher rate. Why? Because the overwhelming majority of JAG lawyers apply the law as it was intended to be applied. So listen, people are fleeing from the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office. Maybe those JAG lawyers will come in and say, we're actually here to follow the law, so we're not going to do your dirty bidding. We think you need to investigate Jonathan Ross for a possible civil rights violation.
And just so people understand, Glenn, because there's different subpoenas. There's ones for documents. It seems the ones, and this is based on reporting, the Justice Department issued subpoenas to Minnesota officials specifically about their potential involvement in impeding in the investigation and the work of ICE. But do you usually subpoena the target?
No, you don't.
So who grants these?
You know why you don't? You don't subpoena the people you're investigating and perhaps intending to indict. Why? Because those are the people who have an automatic Fifth Amendment right against testifying before the grand jury and potentially providing the government information they can then use to prosecute you. So we have a policy at the Department of Justice, as documented in the included in the U.S. Attorney's Manual, which is our procedural Bible as federal prosecutors, says you don't subpoena, you don't grand jury subpoena targets of an investigation. Now, there is an exception, and if you apply your way up the chain at the Department of Justice, let's assume you're criminally investigating a corporation and there are 12 people on the board of the corporation, and you want to kind of go for the lowest hanging fruit and maybe try to subpoena them to come in. You can get authority to subpoena a potential target, but we rarely do it, and only under very unique circumstances.
No, that's helpful. I just wanted people to know the big picture, because I thought it was so odd at first that they're investigating, because it seems like there's two different things going on. One investigation for subpoenas involving the big fraud case, which is different in Minnesota, and the second specifically trying to target Governor Walz, I'm like, and Mayor Fry, I'm like, you wouldn't subpoena a target. That made no sense. I'm trying to, Glenn Kirschner. But so, Glenn, going back to another thing at ICE, there was reporting Hennepin County Sheriff Dewana Witt said at a news conference, I'm seeing and hearing about people in our county being stopped, questioned, and harassed solely because of the color of their skin. And she said, repeat it, solely because is the operative word here, and that this is clear discrimination. I know that Supreme Court decision earlier this year, last year with ICE. Is this within that the parameters of that? Just look at black and brown people, go, okay, you, everybody off to the side, show me your papers.
Yeah, all court rulings aside, that violates the Fourth Amendment. I understand that this Supreme Court is trying to dumb down the Fourth Amendment prohibition against an unreasonable search and seizure. So what they did is they said, well, if you have this whole constellation of facts, like, okay, dude is speaking with an accent. He's hanging out at a 7-Eleven parking lot. He appears to be a day laborer. Maybe that puts you, but here's the thing, Dean, that says nothing about the status of that person in the United States, whether they're a citizen, they're documented, they're undocumented, they have a pending asylum application, they're a visitor to the country trying to make a couple of bucks. I mean, it says nothing. So, yes, they're trying to dumb down the protections of the Fourth Amendment, my favorite amendment. But it sounds like this is not all that nuanced what's going on out in Minnesota. Not only are they targeting people based on the color of their skin, they're conducting traffic checkpoints where they're just stopping every vehicle arbitrarily with no reason to do it, and certainly no reasonable articulable suspicion that this person is involved in criminal activity. That's the lowest evidentiary finding that an officer must satisfy before he or she can stop anybody in accordance with the Fourth Amendment protections. They're just blowing by all that. And again, the state law enforcement authorities can do something about it if they choose to. Don't just stand back and tell us it's happening in a press conference. Assert yourself and put a stop to it.
So, Glenn, just so people know that are listening, say ICE comes up to them, because ICE is going to come to all different areas. Yeah. And, the listeners to my show, a great deal, we are activists in our own right, and we want to be defiant. But what are our rights? Like if we're standing on the corner, an ICE agent walks up and says, do you have proof that you're a U.S. citizen? Can they do that?
They can do it. So there's something called police contact. Okay, that's actually the lowest level of involvement between an officer and a citizen. But police contact literally looks like a police officer walking up to you and asking you a question. There's no prohibition against the police officer walking up to you and asking you a question. But the minute he impedes your ability to walk the F away, that's a seizure. And the Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable seizures shall not be violated. So you can walk away. You're not required to answer. I'm not going to give legal advice because every situation has an infinite number of variables, and you have to do what you think is in your best interest, particularly for your own safety. But you don't have to stand there and engage in them. And here's the challenge, Dean. The minute you try to walk away in accordance with your constitutional rights, if they grab you, you've now been unconstitutionally seized. And the problem is, it doesn't seem like there is a robust forum or mechanism to address the violation of your Fourth Amendment rights the way they're just running roughshod over all of the people in Minnesota and law enforcement, state law enforcement. I can't speak for them. I shouldn't say what they are or are not doing, but I haven't seen a single federal officer held to account for his or her unlawful, in violation of Minnesota state law, or unconstitutional conduct. Start holding them accountable.
Glenn and I cannot agree more. The same way we were begging the DOJ to prosecute Donald Trump in a swift and timely manner, you need various Democratic AGs or Democratic county prosecutors in various states. I wish it's not just Minnesota, because look, I just wrote an article. I mean, you have ICE actions that are clearly excessive, going from Massachusetts to Maryland to California to Portland. It's everywhere. That's why it's endemic. It is systematic. I'm never like an abolished person. I don't know how you can reform ICE. So at this point, this entity and this agency is so corrupted by Trump people and Trumpers that I really would be saying this one's got to be abolished and rebuilt, but still prosecute. And that was my biggest point earlier last week on the show. And I wrote an article. It can't just be abolish ICE because these people show up in a new agency called, not ICE. It's the same people. Yeah. You got to prosecute to change conduct. Isn't that the key to this?
You can't listen with accountability, actual accountability, which looks like investigations. And if the evidence supports it, prosecutions with accountability, all things are possible. Without accountability, you get ICE. You get this nonsense and this excessive force and this, and you get masked marauders with guns, roaming our countryside, violating the law and the constitutional rights of people. So I couldn't agree with you more. You've got to start holding them accountable at some point. And Dean, you mentioned some of the states. I wish these states would band together and bring an equal protection claim, because I heard somebody was an official from Minnesota say, do you realize we have less than 1% of the Somali population? There is a higher percentage in Texas, in Utah, in one of the other red states, and they're not. Listen, the pattern is unmistakable and the action is unconstitutional in violation of the Equal Protection Clause. You can't just run into, blue states, run roughshod over the people on some pretext of immigration enforcement because you're violating the Constitution. Again, let's go hard. Let's go, go peacefully. Let's go legally, but let's start going hard. I hope people begin to get that message.
We absolutely have to. It's certainly a theme I've been hitting over and over and over. Last thing, because I don't want to run out of time with you, because Lindsay Halligan, I know you talked about it on your show last night. People know where Trump appointed her. She was a real estate lawyer that Trump met at Mar-a-Lago. Their eyes met. Next thing you know, she's on his defense team. Then she's in the White House. Then she's U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. And now she's, I think, out on the street. What can you tell us about what happened now?
So, the Evelyn Wood, or the Reader's Digest version, is Lindsay Halligan was pretending to be a U.S. attorney. And when a Trump-appointed judge, David Novak, issued an order, which I call the "splain yourself, Lindsay" order, she couldn't splain herself, right? Because a judge had ruled she was not lawfully appointed as U.S. attorney. But it didn't matter to her because they flout, the authority of courts. And so she kept signing pleadings, U.S. Attorney Halligan, U.S. Attorney. And they're like, no, you're not. And Judge David Novak just issued a scathing bench slap and said, Lindsay Halligan is, quote, masquerading as a U.S. attorney, and it's over. And that 18-page order, I urge everybody to read it because it really sings. And they said Lindsay Halligan's court filing is more befitting of a cable news personality than a DOJ lawyer. Within hours of Judge Novak issuing his order, she quit the DOJ. Bye-bye, Lindsay. Bye-bye.
Bye. And Pam Bondi put out a statement. We are living in a time when a president's ability to staff key law enforcement positions face serious obstacles. Like how unfair they are applying the law and the Constitution to who we're trying to get to do the job. Bullshit.
The nerve of those federal judges. We're living in a time when they think the law is still a thing. What's wrong with, have they not been paying attention to what DOJ has been doing? The law is now dead, or at least it's in a coma.
That judge is going to be sent to Iceland/Greenland at some point because Trump can't keep them straight. Before I let you go, where's the best place for people to follow you, my friend?
Come on over to Substack. I mean, I've got my Daily Justice Matters videos up on my YouTube channel, but we do community meetings at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time almost every night. We have a great, big, vibrant, thriving community. We support one another. We talk about how we can get more engaged. We talk about the legal issues of the day. And come on over and join us on Substack, glennkirschner.substack.com. Everything free, nothing behind a paywall. Come join us.
Great stuff, Glenn. Thanks so much for joining. Have a great trip. I look forward to chatting with you when you get back.
Thanks, Dean.
Take care, my friend.